we were running 100 shows a year. We only did that 1 year, but we ran 75 shows for several years. So, and all over in the United States, England, Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii.
So tell us, how important is Detroit to the hot rod culture?
Well, I've argued with a lot of people, my friends in California, that the hot rod culture really started in Detroit. And, of course, they laugh at me. And I said, I thought Henry Ford was on the ice in like '04 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it was $9.99. And they say, well, I said, that was really a hot rod. That was the first hot rod. But Detroit is very important. Certainly not as important as California. And the one thing, there's two things that really made California the place for it. Well, of course, they've had the dry lake racing since the 30s. But on top of that, they've got year-round good weather. And so when the magazine business took off, there were some magazines in New York and some other cities, but the bulk of the magazine business was all in California. And those two things, I think, the weather and the magazines, are what really promoted the hot rod sport. And of course, it's a year-round event out there. That's why our shows did so well in the East. Our shows have always run in the cold weather. I never produced outdoor events. I always produced indoor events. And in the winter, there's nothing else for a guy to do. But they still want to think about their cars. They might not want to drive them, but they want to talk about them, and they want to get with their friends and stuff. So the car show became the perfect venue for getting together and reminiscing and what have you.
Did you ever race cars?
Oh, sure. I drove circle track for 25 years. I took a little bit off in the middle when I first started my show producing career from 59 to about 64, but then I raced up to 77. That was my last year. I started with what was called hard tops. I paid $35 for it in the early 50s, and that became a modified by the end of the 50s. And there was a track fairly close to my house here in Detroit called Motor City Speedway. And it took me 5 years to win a main event there. I finally won a main event before I quit. And then I started my business in 59 and then picked up racing again about 63 or 4 and raced till 77 and ended up with late model stocks. So, yeah, it was fun. We raced all over this part of the country. So I was a busy guy.
Wow. That is awesome. So, in other words, you paid less for a race car than what someone might pay for the die-cast version in that race car today.
Well, I just bought a 37 Ford off of a lot. I knew nothing, Yeah, I was into cars, but I knew nothing about hopping them up or anything like that. But boy, you start learning quick if you want to win some races. I think the first year I raced for most of the year, and the best I ever did was finish fourth in a consolation race or something. But it didn't take long to figure out that I had to have better engines and better tires and all of that, and that's what happened. So I became a pretty experienced driver pretty quick. And that track, Motor City Speedway, there were other tracks in the area, but that track was on TV every Monday night. So it was quite exciting. Your friends would see you racing on TV and stuff. So it was pretty neat.
Did you end up getting a car collection?
Did I have a car collection?
Yeah.
I had 55 cars.
Oh, my.
And I showed all over the country. I started a car collection, as my business became successful, really in the 70s and 80s. I started buying cars of all kinds. I mean, I liked everything. So I had some classic cars. I was on a Concours committee here in Detroit. called the Meadowbrook Concours. I had like 5 classics. I had a couple of Ferraris. I had a lot of hot rods. I had a couple of Bonneville cars. People are always asking me, what's your favorite car? Well, that's impossible because you need to have half a dozen favorite cars, one of each type. So for muscle cars, I mean Mustangs, I had bought a new Shelby Mustang in 1968. That was a fantastic car. And I always liked Trans Ams, but my 33 Packard was my best classic because you could just get in it and drive it any place, and it was a 12-cylinder car. And so you can't just say, did you have a favorite car? I didn't. I don't think I ever had a favorite car, one car. The favorite car that we built or hauled or leased to car shows was certainly the Red Baron, which had been designed by, the concept was created by Tom Daniel, an artist out of Las Vegas for Monogram. And they came out with a model, and I happened to run into them right at that time when they were just starting to release a model, and made an arrangement with them to build a full-size car, which we hauled all over the country, and which I owned for, up until about 10 years ago. We built it in 68. It was built by Chuck Miller here in Detroit, and then I sold it to the Speedway Museum in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Your book, Hot Rod Detroit, A Complete History of Hot Rodding in the Motor City, is that the one that's more photo-based than the other one?
No, the one, Hot Rod Detroit Pictorial, which followed Hot Rod Detroit. What happened when we did Hot Rod Detroit, we were really interested in stating the history of every aspect of the hot rod sport. So we included the racetracks, the drag strips, the customizers, the speed shops, everything we could think of. But when we got done with the book, we said, what would we I still had a lot of pictures. I've been a camera freak all my life, and I had thousands and thousands of pictures. And I looked at the book and said, I had all these pictures, and said, if we'd had more pages, would we have been able to put something in there, or what would we have put in? What did we leave out of Hot Rod Detroit? And we came to the conclusion that, there were a lot of things that we had left out, things like the pinstripers, the interest today in what I call the rat rods or traditional cars. And so that's what we did. We added those things that we thought could have been in the first book, but the first book would then have been 500 pages. And so we came up with a second book, and I keep saying we, but it was mainly me, just this past year. It's been out just about a year. And the first book, Hot Rod Detroit, is just about gone. I've only got 25 copies left, so when it's gone, it's gone. I reprinted twice, so I won't be reprinting that book. But I think it's a great book, and what I like about it is, I'm an older guy, and I like to make a statement for history so that when the young guys come along and say, how did all this happen, they can get a book like mine. And there's other books that cover the same kind of thing, but not specifically about Detroit. And they can find out how this all happened. But there's never been a book like this done about the hot rod sport in California, naming all the people that really made it happen and how it evolved and that kind of thing. So, and then, too, in my book, Hot Rod Detroit, I wanted to tell the complete story of the Michigan Hot Rod Association, which I've been president of in the 50s, and which started the Detroit Autorama in 1953, and they wanted to build a drag strip. And they built that drag strip and ran it for about 10 years. There were thousands and thousands of clubs in America. All had basically the same goal, to promote the sport and to have fun and to have their cars and show their cars and race them and whatever. But only Michigan Hot Rod, so far as I know, is the only club in the country that fulfilled that desire. So I think that is a story worth telling, and that's why one of the reasons I did the book.
So, who are some of those people that were influential, like yourself, in building up the sport of hot rods and custom cars?
Well, the main people, as I said, because of the weather, Wally Parks was the king of drag racing. He started the National Hot Rod Association. Robert E. Peterson, Bob Peterson, he was called Pete. He started, at one point, he had 18 magazines before he passed away and the business was sold and taken apart. Although the magazines, the good magazines, have survived. And then there were so many builders that evolved from that whole sport in California, the Edelbrocks, Offenhausers, Wyans. And all you have to do is go to the SEMA show and see what that sport has evolved into today. I mean, that's the biggest hot rod show in the world by far. And, it's a commercial show, so it's all about the future and the people who built all of these parts and cars and made it all happen.
What's the difference between hot rods and custom cars, in your opinion?
Well, it depends who you're talking to. Everybody has a different idea, and if you're talking to, like, NSRA, National Street Rod Association, they're going to tell you it's a year thing for the main part. Hot rods were pre-World War II, and custom cars were post-World War II. For me, it's mostly what the car looks like. If the car is finished off and customized, and especially if it's a later model car, I'm saying 50s on up, then it's most likely a custom and not built for drag racing or for going fast. Most hot rods are built to go fast. Whether you can ever use all that horsepower is questionable because, you got many of the cars have over 500 horsepower and they don't weigh anything. Some of them weigh less than 1,500 or 2,000 pounds, and so you got a tremendous horsepower to weight ratio there. And they are very fast, and you want to be careful when you're driving one.
What's the next project that you'll be working on?
Well, I'm only 87, so who knows? I've really enjoyed doing the book thing. I don't do a lot of the writing myself, but I bring together people that can write about a specific area. And so we're thinking about a couple of right now. And I love going to the car shows and meeting all the people that I met over the years. So I would like to do a book possibly about the ISCA, the International Show Car Association, which is a sponsoring organization of the car shows. It's sort of like the NASCAR of car shows. And then there's a couple of other book projects. I don't know if we'll get them done, but I'm hoping we will. And I always like being a part of the car shows. If I can offer any advice to anybody, that's fun, and I'll continue doing that and continue going to shows and trying to be somewhat of a part of the hot rod sport.
What advice would you give someone that is just starting out in either building or collecting hot rods and custom cars?
Well, for collecting, you need money. So whatever, I think you need to try to find a niche in the sport and try to create something where you're either manufacturing something or designing or building something. But I think the most important thing is to get an education. I don't care what kind of cars you're into, but you need some kind of a design degree whether it's an engineering degree or whatever, and then take it from there.
Where can people learn more about, you and the cars on social media or on the web?
I'm not aware. I mean, there is a website on me, but I'm not aware of all of that, and I don't spend a lot of time on computers, so I really can't answer that. There's been articles on myself and other producers and promoters and guys that have helped to make some of these events come true. But I don't think there's been the interest, or I don't think there's been the response that there should be. And I think there's a real opportunity there for somebody to get into the history aspect of it. I know that guys like Pat Ganal and a couple of others have become quite adept at promoting and developing. Ken Gross out of Washington, D.C. does a number of events with tied in with various museums and gets sponsors and so forth. And I think that's all great. I think there should be a lot more of that.
Well, I greatly appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your history and sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, thank you. It's been fun talking to you, and just like, we talked at the Cincinnati show, and even there it's fun going back, and guys come by and remember me. In fact, the guy came up to me on Saturday last and realized that I have a collection of trophies from the car shows and so forth, and offered me one of his trophies that he had won in 1970. And I just love it when those kinds of things happen. So it keeps me involved, and I have a place out in Colorado where I can look at these things, work on them, and look at my pictures and all the history that we've tried to promote. So thank you for the interview.
Welcome. What's the next stop on the tour for you?
What's the next what?
Tour stop for you. Where's the next place that y'all going to be?
Pittsburgh next week. Yeah. And then I'm going from Pittsburgh to the Grand National Roadster Show, and then back to Michigan and doing Milwaukee, Detroit, and Toronto. That's the end of the indoor season. And then the outdoor season will start in about June.
Sounds great. Best
Thank
of
you.
luck. Have a good one, Bob.
Okay. Bye-bye.